All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our graduation event for the Cybersecurity Bootcamp. I can't believe it's been 12 weeks already that we've been doing this bootcamp, starting from the different topics to the session that we've had at Sage and even the KPMG event. Also, you guys going through the mentoring program with the Sage mentors. It is with an immense pride and joy that I'm just so happy. And I just want to say congratulations to everyone for completing the CompTIA Security Bootcamp. Your hard work, commitment, come in every Saturday for 4 hours. And your determination has really brought you to this significant milestone. And I and the rest of the team are so thrilled to celebrate this moment with you. So throughout this bootcamp, you've demonstrated unwavering dedication to learning and growth, not only for yourself, but to your career. I know we've already had some good news of some people getting jobs and some people getting interviews. And this is essentially why we do Seidea. Essentially, we want to help you guys really build and cultivate a career within cybersecurity. As we know, the landscape is ever changing and ever evolving, but your passion to stay up to date with latest trends and technology, has undoubtedly contributed to your success in this field. And your accomplishment not only reflects your personal achievements, but also embodies the spirit and the mission of Seidea, which is really to create opportunities for those, especially Black, Asian, and minority ethnic women who are interested in this field. So once again, congratulations on your graduation, and I wish you all the very best in your endeavors. Obviously, we'll be in touch because I think if you guys remember the email, hopefully it should be by today, but by next week, Friday, if you've not done already, please send us the dates for your exam. This allows us to check in with you and also see how we can help you after the boot camp. So moving on to the next session, we're going to be having two esteemed guests. We're going to have Amelia and Joshua. So I'm going to start with Amelia and just giving everyone a bit of a background about her. So Amelia started her career in 2019 as an apprentice in the legal sector, undertaking a qualification in network infrastructure, and also working in their second line support team. Now, the introduction of COVID completely changed the way IT teams functioned, and Amelia felt that her role no longer suited, her desire to kind of interact with others whilst making a difference. So she decided to take a secondment to the cybersecurity team. And after 4 months of this, Amelia was approached by a consultancy firm to take on a cyber assurance consultant role within a government organization. Now, this was her break into the cyber security sector that sparked her interest. And over the 2 years that followed, Amelia has developed a passion for CNI security, and she has worked on several major national infrastructure projects. And she's now working in aviation within looking at cybersecurity and also consulting for major UK airports. Outside of her day-to-day, Amelia is advocating for diversifying cybersecurity, as well as breaking down the barriers within the industry. And she's currently the chair of the Bridewell's Women's Network and has completed a UN delegate program alongside a full-time computing degree. So thank you so much, Amelia, if we could give her reactions of claps. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm now going to welcome our second speaker before we start our panel event. So our second speaker is Joshua Oyitso. So Joshua Oyitso is highly skilled and experienced in the core areas of cybersecurity management. He possesses a demonstrable track record of implementing and auditing internationally recognized security policies, frameworks, controls, and solutions. His philosophy is to keep security simple through the use of technology and automation. So Joshua also has the CompTIA security certification. So he's gone through the process and is also a certified information systems auditor and also a certified ethical hacker, and has the Microsoft Security Operations Associate certification, as well as a certified ISO 22301 lead implementer. He's committed to developing himself within cybersecurity, which we can already see through all these certifications. And as a result, he's skilled in training, engaging, transforming people in cybersecurity. As a result, he's also a speaker at the third Africa Data Security Conclave in 2022. He's the founder of Info Forte Africa, a cybersecurity startup in Africa, where he works as an IT resilience and business continuity manager at the Bank of Industry, which is Nigeria's largest development bank. Joshua is also a fully qualified lawyer with an LLM from University of Birmingham, and he leverages his transferable skills from his legal background to excel in cybersecurity, governance, risk, and compliance. So if we can also give a virtual claps to Joshua, and then we'll begin with our panel event. So I just want to say thank you so much, Joshua and Amelia, for taking your time to spend time with us today. I'm going to start with like my first question, and this really is to kind of know a bit more about your backgrounds, and I'm going to start with Amelia and then move on to Joshua. And the first question is, how did you begin your journey in the cybersecurity field, and what motivated you to pursue a career within this industry?
So I would definitely say I never intended on going into cybersecurity. It really wasn't something that I was interested in growing up. And, you know, I never thought I would want to work in IT or cyber. It just wasn't something that was necessarily available to me. I think, especially as a woman, it's not, STEM careers aren't necessarily pushed onto you in the same way that they are sort of pushed onto boys, you know, when you're sort of 14, 15, 16. So it wasn't something that I knew was available to me. And then I sort of, after GCSEs, had decided that as much as I was very academic, I really didn't like the way the school system worked, and I really didn't like the pressure that put on me to be a high achiever. And so I found an apprenticeship within a UK law, well, international law firm, and took that, not knowing anything really about IT, never really having studied it, and sort of walked in on the first day thinking, what have I done? And actually quite quickly found that I was quite interested in technology and very interested in how people interact with technology. And in the legal sector, technology is coming on leaps and bounds. So it was almost a huge part of my role within second line IT at the time, was around educating people on how to use technology, and also as part of that, educating people on how to protect their data. And especially in the legal sector, data is very, very important. So from there, I sort of thought, well, maybe cyber is an option for me, but I still had the perception that to work in cybersecurity, you had to be very, very technical, and you had to be, you know, not as sociable or not as personable. And when COVID happened, I think, and as it says in the summary, I didn't like my role anymore. It just wasn't for me, but I didn't want to leave the industry to do something else. I'd considered, you know, going down the legal route and getting a degree in law. And then I thought I wanted to explore some more options for me. So through that, I sort of used those transferable skills of knowing a bit about technology, but being very good at engaging with people and teaching people how to understand concepts within a secondment. And very, very quickly through that, I became someone that people could go to for information within the firm about security. And I built a reputation. And I thought, oh, I wish I could just do this as a job. And that's when consultancy sort of came in, and I understood what consultancy was and what it did for businesses. And from there, I was headhunted for a consulting role. So I think the motivation for me has always been being in a role where I feel challenged, and I feel like I'm also learning. And I think I got to a point with my IT role where I felt that I wasn't doing any more of that. And that's sort of how I fell into cyber. I think, you know, an external motivator to that is cyber is a very lucrative industry. That's what people tell you. People tell you, you know, you make lots of money if you go into cyber. And it's totally okay to be motivated by a salary. We go to work to enjoy our life outside of work. And I think for me, that was definitely also a driver, was that I wanted a role that would facilitate the sort of lifestyle I was after. And cyber very much did that, whilst also giving me a good work-life balance.
Thank you so much, Amelia. And what I really liked about what you said was talking about exploring and your communication skills as well. And that soft skills with kind of being the go-to person and cultivating that personal brand, you know, within your role, which kind of led you into like your second role. So thank you so much for answering that question. We're now going to move on to Joshua.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. So just my story is really similar to Amelia. I mean, it all started during the pandemic. I was kind of stuck in my career. I wanted to change because I was an in-house lawyer in the bank, and it was really boring. I'd done that for 2 years, so I wanted a new challenge. And at the time, everyone was like saying, "Oh, take a course during the pandemic, like the lockdown." I was at home, so I'm like, okay, what can I do? I was looking for a tech skill, a skill that I could, you know, make money from, if I'm being completely honest, because tech was the new industry where everyone was moving to. So I looked at what I could do. I looked at being a software developer that involved coding, and I don't have a technical background, so I'm like, this is a no-go area for me. UI UX, I never really figured out what that was, so that was not an option. Then one day I just did a random Google search and I came across cybersecurity, and it seemed pretty interesting, from my research, because my background was in litigation. Before I moved to the bank, I was heading the litigation portfolio of the bank, working with external solicitors and everything. But I realized that cybersecurity was quite similar because it involved you thinking from both sides, look like offensive security, defensive security, which is similar to going to courts and being a lawyer. Like, you have to prepare a case, as the plaintiff, think of what the defense is going to do, so that was the way I was trained, and that's the way my mind was working. So I'm like, okay, cybersecurity is the thing, for me. And I just started, I started with CompTIA. That was the first area I looked into, because I spoke to the people in the IT departments and my colleagues in the IT departments, and they just told me, hey, CompTIA is a good place to start. I did some research on the internet. I came across this guy, Professor Mesa, as well, and he just made it really simple. So that's how it all started. And luckily for me, at the time, the bank needed staff who would, in the business continuity management area, because there were so many companies in Nigeria at the time were collapsing, because without having an online presence, without having backups, without having any sort of resilience during the pandemic, there was no way to make money. There was nothing. So they got a couple of young people in the bank, and luckily for me, I was selected. I put myself forward, if I'm being honest, and that's how it all started. And next year I did the ISO 22301 certification, and it all came from them. But I think it starts from cybersecurity starts from knowing what you can do. You need to know your skills. I mean, they're touching on these are very important with transferable skills, because it's not just something that, it's abstract. It leverages on everything like GRC, securities, governance, risk, compliance. As a lawyer, you draft a lot of documents, so that's the governance aspects of things. The risk deals with the analysis. As a lawyer, you're always advising people, hey, this is, what you can face if you do this. And compliance, that's like second nature for most lawyers, because we're trained to comply with statutes. So I think the first thing for cultivating career in cybersecurity is knowing your skill sets, knowing what you excel at, what you're good at doing, and then that can help you fit into an area in cybersecurity. So if you're not really a documents heavy paperwork type of person, you may want to look at roles as a SOC analyst and what have you. But if you like paperwork like me, GRC is the way to go. So I think that's the key points I want to touch upon. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua. And I think what I really liked about your story is that you talked about the transferable skills, about how you go in and having those skills through litigation helped you understand the kind of defense from offensive security and as well as blue team, red team, essentially. Thank you so much for that. Now I'm going to go into the next question, and the next question is, what are some of the essential skills and qualities that professionals should develop to excel within the cybersecurity industry. This time I'm going to start with Joshua, and then I'm going to move on to Amelia.
I think Amelia has made my job a bit easier. The people skills. You need to have good people skills. Because you're going to be working with people. There's a lot of awareness training. There's a lot of you need to engage a lot of people from different backgrounds. So working as a business continuity manager, I've had to work with people in internal audits. I've had to work with different people, different mindsets, different ways of doing things, different ways of dealing with issues and whatnot. So you need to have very good people skills. You need to understand how to convince people, because everyone has their normal job. Like, for example, I work in the bank, so they're like relationship managers. They have to manage relationship with the bank's customers and everything. But apart from that, they have a cybersecurity duty to make sure the bank's information assets are protected. And you want to make sure that when you're communicating, when you're working with these people, you're not stressing them, because everyone is doing the job. Some are passionate about their job, some are not so passionate, some just want the money, so you need to have some form of emotional intelligence and how to deal with people. It then goes on to, you then look at dealing with senior management in an organization, for example. So for most ISO, for most policies or any security framework, you need to get the buy-in from senior management. And senior management, more often than not, they don't want to spend money. They're just looking at like security, but you want to know how to convince them. And this is where transferable skills come in as well. I'm not trying to deter anyone. If you're not really good at convincing people, you can learn these things. Even though I was a lawyer, I was quite timid as well, like in an organization, but you learn these things, you learn how to relate with people, you know what makes them, what can offend them, what makes them happy, what they want to hear. And these are things you learn over time. No one's built with all these skills, but knowing how to deal with people is a very important skill. And secondly, you have to have a growth mindset, because you will need to do a lot of learning. The security landscape is always changing. Right now, everyone knows of the cloud. We have disruptive technologies coming on board, the AI and machine learning. So you need to keep on learning. You don't just say, I have a certification and I'm going to stop there. And learning is not only limited to certification. Sometimes just go on YouTube, just search for stuff. Or I have a different Twitter page, like my burner, but I only follow cybersecurity pages on that. And I just occasionally, maybe once or twice a day, I just go there, I just see things. I just keep in. That's how I know what's going on, because you need to keep learning these things, because everyone knows what a zero-day attack is. There are things that just come up on so you need to keep learning, you need to keep improving. Now, let me not say everything. Let me stop right here, and Amelia will take it from here. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think possibly something that I'd like to reiterate is the knowing your skills point that Joshua made. I think I certainly didn't know my skills for a good portion of my career, and I think that really did hold me back, because I didn't value the skills that weren't necessarily the key things that people consider associated with cybersecurity. And sort of, I think a big thing, and I said this to a cohort at another bootcamp that I'd spoken at last year, and everyone looked at me like I was a bit mad, but I said, well, as a cyber consultant, I think one of the best skills you can have is empathy. And I think it's a really essential skill. And I noticed this when I worked in IT, and I notice it now that I work in security, that security for me is very natural. It's everything I talk about all day long. It's something I'm very familiar with. But then I speak to my clients, and it's a whole new world for them. And it can quite often be quite frustrating if you're talking to someone and you're trying to get them to understand why what you're telling them is important, and they don't always agree with that, because you have different priorities in your role to what someone else does. But I think through being quite empathetic that their challenges and their priorities are important to them, it's helped me balance really well how I reason with people. And I think that's just through empathy. And I've had people say to me, well, what if I'm not naturally empathetic? And that's totally fine. I think empathy is a skill that we can always build upon and work on. But I think being able to see things from other people's side is a skill that's massively undervalued, because especially when you work on a project where you might be, your main priority is security, but someone else's is ensuring that the system is consistently running and has consistent uptime, you may have very conflicting ideals about what needs, not what needs doing immediately and what's important, but you should try and see it from their side as well and be empathetic to that, because people want to work with you more if they think that you care about their priorities as much as yours. And I found in consultancy that works very, very well. And I think a very essential skill, which, you know, I 3 years ago was sort of on the other side of this, where I was listening to people talk about these sorts of skills. And I think one thing that's always stuck with me is just the power of networking. I mean, I've got all of the roles that I've had thus far in my career through networking, talking to people, knowing people. You never really realize how important those really small exchanges you have are. I was at a conference last year and I had a very brief, introduction with someone who did in-house security at a retail firm. And I got a message on LinkedIn last week asking if they'd like us to work with them. And that was just from one exchange where, I just sort of said what I do, what my company does, wasn't trying to sell anything, was just very interested in what this person did. And from there, I've been able to bring in business to my company from doing that. But also I've become a reputable person for that person to come to for the sort of services that my organization provide. And further to that, I've been able to get a lot of opportunity through networking. I got this opportunity to speak to you through LinkedIn, and I'm quite keen with LinkedIn to really push that to people, really build up your connections on LinkedIn, because just through liking or commenting or messaging people just to ask questions about maybe what they do, that was something big that I did at the start of my career to sort of build up my understanding. I've built a really good community of people around me who are very willing to help me when I need it, and I help them. And that is a big skill that it does take time. It's quite difficult to put yourself out there, especially when you're new in a career, because you don't necessarily feel that you're ready to do that or that you have the answers people need. But that's another point of knowing your skill set. If you know what you can bring to the table, when you talk to others, you show up as your full self, and that makes networking so much easier.
I agree, and such good points from both of you. I think what I really liked was when Joshua talked about having the Twitter account, just following different cybersecurity accounts to keep updated. I think that's very genius, and I'll definitely recommend everyone to do that. And with what you said, Amelia, about networking, I think networking is so important. I think everyone here has had the opportunity to network through, whether it's a Sage in-person event or the KPMG online event. These are people that you can kind of network with. But also, when you talked about that empathy and emotional intelligence, that's so important, because with emotional intelligence, especially within security, is very, very important. Now it allows me to move on to the third question, which is, can you share a challenging experience you have faced in your career, and how were you able to overcome it? This time I'm going to start with Amelia and then Joshua.
It's a good question, and I suppose I didn't want to prepare too much for this so that my responses were organic, but I really did have to think about this. I think I personally have had a lot of challenge in my career around being a woman in a male-dominated field, but not just that, being a young woman in my field. I definitely found that at the start of my consulting career, I worked in government, and the attitudes of some of the individuals that work there is still quite old-fashioned, that people would just assume that I was the person in the meeting that took notes, or I was the person who didn't have the answers, or I wasn't someone that they could go to and that they should ask my male colleagues for answers around my work. And I found that quite difficult. I found that I didn't enjoy being spoken over. I didn't like being condescended, as no one would. And that took quite a toll on me, because I then started to question, well, maybe I don't know things if people aren't approaching me for those answers, or if they're treating me that way. And I think I quite internalized that for quite a while, and I've had fantastic mentors, both male and female, in the industry. And through talking to them and the sort of conversations that I've had, it was good for me to sort of build up learning how to stand up for myself. And that seems quite silly and quite confrontational, and I don't do confrontation at all. So just in meetings, it would more be if someone had spoken over me, it would be for me to say, no, as I was saying, or, you know, linking back to my ideas and taking accountability for my work. And that can be quite hard at the start of your career, sort of taking out the point of being maybe the only female in the conversation. It was just learning to have accountability for my deliverables, and it made it so much easier for me to stand up for myself and to say, I did that, or I'm responsible for that, you can come to me for that. And sort of through time, that's become a lot easier for me. I have fantastic colleagues that are wonderful allies who, you know, don't let people speak to me like that or behave in that way. But there are still attitudes in the cyber field that are not necessarily up to date with how the world currently functions, and that's going to take time to improve. But I think I've definitely found that through educating those around me on how they can support me has been a good benefit to me in the long run, because it means that if people can't necessarily understand that, you know, that I've been made to feel that way, they can definitely also be in my corner as well. So it's sort of multifaceted, I suppose, that building up my confidence by taking accountability in my work has meant that I can overcome the challenge of those differences in how I'm treated, because people can start to see that you're not a character that is going to be challenged, and you're not going to bend to that challenge.
Thank you so much, Amelia, for that. And also what I loved about you sharing your experience was the practical tips on how you were able to overcome that, which I really, really find inspiring. And I think that is definitely a problem within cybersecurity sometimes. As we know the figures, it's 85% in the UK and 15% women, 85% men. And you know, depending on your team capabilities and things like that, you know, sometimes you might be the only woman, sometimes you might have more women in your team. So thank you for sharing your story. I'm now going to move on to Joshua.
I think Amelia has said a lot. There's really I was going to jump off what she said. The attitude of people, it's a major challenge. I remember I'll give a particular example. So prior to the pandemic, we didn't really have, you know, our backup operation wasn't really the best, you know. So we had to implement backups, and at the time it was proving it was slowing down the computer systems because of the way we had to do things and whatnot. So this really affected a lot of people's work, and they got really, really, really offended, and it was a difficult time, you know. But what I would say is working with people who are not as tech savvy as you are can be an issue. So you need to be really patient. You need to learn how to work with people like that. You need to have that in mind. You don't just think that, oh, you're just going to come, you have such a useful skill to offer, and everyone's going to just look at you and be like, hey, come on, and just believe in you. No, it doesn't work that way, you know. So there's that too. It takes a lot of patience. Like Amelia said, empathy. You need to know how to put yourself in the shoes of other people. That's very, very important. I can't overstress that. But I mean, she covered that field really well. So I'm just gonna go to something else. And a challenge I faced was knowing how to sell myself, you know, because I do a lot of consulting jobs on the side, contract roles. But when I go for the interviews, I had a lot of issues because people say, oh, you don't have enough experience, you don't have a computer science background, and whatnot and whatnot. But I'm going to give you a very simple tip today that will help you with the interview. So what I usually suggest is just be honest, tell them your background, tell them where you've come from. In fact, that will even impress them the more, knowing that, okay, you're not from a technical background, but try to leverage on your transferable skills. Use that word, transferable skills. It's a very good word to use when you're going for interviews. So, okay, look, I know I've not necessarily done this, but I've done something similar. And if I'm put in this position, this is how I'll do it. This is how just tell them how you will do things, because they will try to say, well, what have you done? And more often than not, you won't have done most of the things, because each role differs. Some roles are really cloud heavy, you know, and if you've not had any experience working in a cloud environment, what are you going to do? You know, but you need to say, okay, you've learned this, you have the transferable skills, so you need to know how to sell yourself. You need to know how to network. You need to learn a way to message people, random people on LinkedIn. You need to, these are skills you need to learn, but leveraging on your transferable skills, learning how to sell yourself, learn how to build a brand. It's very important that you build a brand. Like, you go on your LinkedIn, make sure everything and your CV, try to make sure it tallies. Don't, because if you drop your resume, a recruiter can go check your LinkedIn, and if it's way different than what you put in your resume, that can create a problem. Because what happens more often than not, for when you're applying for a role, you have to tailor your resume to the role you're applying for. I won't advise you just have one single resume that is going to be sending everywhere, because you may not. This is not a CV review session, but I think it's very important that this when you're applying for roles, so you don't get stuck and just feel like, oh, you wasted all your money and time learning, going through the process of learning the skills, and you can't necessarily apply it. So it's very important to learn how to sell yourself, learn how to, market yourself as a professional. Know the niche you are going for. Don't just say cybersecurity professional. Like, try to tailor it to something. Like, I tell people, I'm a business continuity manager, GRC analyst, cybersecurity auditor. That is my niche. I'm not a SOC analyst. I don't know. I have an idea of, I have the certified ethical hacker certification. I've learned that. I have security, but that's not I know my skill set. I know that if you give me a role that I will struggle, so I go to the area where I'm more comfortable in, and then I can excel. So these are some things that I would advise. These are areas I found challenging, but like, it took me years to, I'm saying this in like 3 minutes, but this is like a year or 18 months of learning. I learned the hard way. I remember, just last story I'll tell. I paid a CV writer to write my resume, and I'll send the resume applying for, and then I didn't get anything, for like 4 months. And it was, at some point I wanted to go back, to law fully, and just like, I'm done with this. But I learned some things. So that's why I said, having a growth mindset, you're gonna have to learn new things, let go of some old things, and it's okay. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Joshua. And, even thank you for sharing the challenge sometimes that comes with moving or from one industry to another, and how you've been able to navigate that by being honest and having that self-awareness. I think what I really like that you said was know your niche. I think that, with the CompTIA Security Plus certification, it really gives you an overview of the different aspects within cybersecurity. And I think what's really great is it would allow you to know which area did I like and which area did I not like. So like I always say, and I remember saying in the bootcamp, network security would never be for me. But I love other aspects, and I definitely love physical security. So I'm now going to move on to the fourth question. And I know you guys have kind of answered this already, but what advice would you give someone who is just starting their career in cybersecurity? So think back to when, before you made that jump, for you, Joshua, before you decided to move more from legal profession to cybersecurity, and Amelia, when you were, and actually I just realized you also started from law. That was not planned. But, going back, what advice would you give a newbie into cybersecurity? And this time I'm going to start with Joshua and then Amelia next.
Most of the advice, I don't want to sound repetitive, so I'm not going to go over what I've said. So I'm going to just bring something new. This doesn't take away from anything I've said before. I'm just adding to what I've said. What I'll say is be patient. Be patient with your learning. Be patient. It took me, I got into uni in 2010. I did my foundation, 09, did a master's, went to law school, did some other random law certifications. They're not random, but you know what I mean. It took me a while to learn how to become a good lawyer. And it's going to take you a while to become a good cybersecurity professional. Good things take time. Don't rush yourself. you need to be very self-aware and objective with yourself. This is where I am right now. This is where I want to go to. It's Amelia, I'm sure she's not talking about. It's called a gap analysis. Most of us may know this thing. You do that in your risk assessments. You need to know where you are. So take your time. You've done the CompTIA Security Plus certification. You're gonna do that. That, like Stephanie said, gives you a very broad overview. It doesn't make you an expert in cybersecurity. That doesn't mean it's a bad certification, but that just means it's an entry-level certification. So from this, you now need to leverage on that knowledge and build the next step. So you have this step, you need to go here. There's a next step. And you need to know what your next step is going to be. And that's why it's very important to do a lot of research. I'm on YouTube a lot. I used to be a Netflix person, but right now I'm always on YouTube because there's so much to learn on the internet. It's interesting. And you need to have that mindset. And it's okay. You know, you have times to do, I do a lot of things, but take some time out, hours a day, 20 minutes, just random, just be scrolling through YouTube. Just open multiple tabs. You can have it, do it on a different browser. When you're bored or you just want to just play something, just put on the background and you learn something. You may not even necessarily need to get a certification. You can learn something on YouTube. You can learn things. I'm not saying go be a certification junkie. If you look at my resume, I have a lot of certifications, but I don't use a lot of them now. I mean, the CEH, I've not done anything related to that, and I have that certification. It's just there. It just looks nice, you know. But at the time, I just wanted to, you know, I was just in a rush. Oh, I want to get, and I wasn't getting no jobs. I was just reading and taking exams at some point in my career. So rather than doing all of that, take your time, learn what you want to excel in, notice the trends worldwide, look at what the world is going. It's really cloud heavy right now. So focus on the cloud. If I can give you anything, just look at the cloud, take your time, learn about cloud security, learn about cloud computing. At least for the next 5 to 8 years, it's going to be pretty lucrative. I can tell you that for free, you know. So notice the trends and know your next step. Don't just say that, oh, I have this thing now, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to learn, go on YouTube, listen to interviews, just play it in the background, just know how these things work, you know, because these are the things that will make you stand out. It's not, you know, it's not rocket science, it's just patience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua, for that. And again, I think I like the strategy aspect of it, and because sometimes you can become a certification junkie when you're new because you just want to learn so much about the industry. And I think, you know, what you said that I think would be really useful for all the participants to remember is that the CompTIA Security Plus is a entry level. And the next step is now you thinking about, where do I see myself? Where is my niche area? Where do I want to specialize in? And I think that's a very important point. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to move on to Amelia.
So I find this very interesting because I spend a lot of my career and the sort of work I do outside of that in the sort of like mentoring and you know, awareness space, with the mindset that I want to be the professional that I needed when I started. So the fact that this question's come up, I'm actually very, very happy about, I suppose, because I've sort of given this a lot of thought. And I sort of have two main pieces of advice here. I suppose the first one, I suppose this is applicable to any industry, but when you apply for roles, know your values. I think that's a really, really big thing. I have had experiences, let's say, within the industry where I have maybe worked for an organization or on a project where the values of the organization that I work for or the project that I'm on don't align with mine and they conflict, and that made me very uncomfortable. When I look for a new organization, I look for somewhere that their values align with mine, because that's really important to me. I think we spend so much time working that you want to be in an environment where you feel like you're all singing from the same hymn sheet, so to speak. I think it's very, very important to have a good idea of what you are looking for, especially when it comes to interviews. I think people forget that you're interviewing a company as much as they're interviewing you. And I think that is a very, very undersold thing, especially in cyber. I think we all look for And because cyber can be quite difficult to secure roles in, especially at entry level, and that's an issue within the industry that we know, you want to make sure the place you're going is right for you. It's not just an opportunity that's there, that it's right for you, because you'll know, especially if any of you have been in roles that have not been for you, it really takes it out of you, and it becomes very difficult in the long term to sort of heal from that. So I definitely say go into interviews and go into job hunting knowing what your values are and knowing what isn't negotiable for you, what isn't something you're willing to compromise on. And that's totally fine. The right opportunity will be there, but you're not compromising what's important to you to get to that point. And I think the second one, there's so much I can say, but I'll stick to two, is massively that comparison is the thief of joy, 100%. And I think in cyber, and I'm very guilty of this, and I still do it now, 4 years in, is I looked at people in the beginning who had established cyber careers, and I'd compared myself to them, that they had certifications that I didn't, and I'm not really a certifications person. I have enough going on with my degree that at the moment it's just not on the cards for me, and that's completely okay. But I looked at people, and they'd had this experience and that experience, and they'd done this and they'd done that, or they'd talked at a certain event, and I took that quite personally, and I sort of compared myself, oh well, I should be doing that, and I'm not doing that. And I think I've learned definitely now that it really doesn't matter, because there are so many things that I have and I'm doing that other people aren't. And that's also fine. Everyone has a different path when it comes to cyber. And I've got colleagues who have got degrees in history and psychology, and I'm doing a technical degree, and so I bring that to the table, whereas they bring the skills that they learn through what they're doing. So I definitely say learning not to compare yourself feels like very generic advice, but I think it's more understanding what you bring to the table stops you from comparing yourself, because it also shows that you have unique skills and qualities through your experience, especially people that have changed careers into security. You bring such a wealth of experience that I may not have as someone that's gone the IT into cyber route. So I think valuing what you have and using that to not compare yourself to others is very important advice. And I think they're both things that it took me quite a long time and a lot of discomfort to get to this point of knowing.
Thank you so much, Amelia, for that. And I love the first one. I think, to be fair, everything just boils down into that kind of knowing your value. And I really liked what you said about when you are interviewing, it's just as much as they're interviewing you, that you're also interviewing the company as well. And I think it's very important to look at their policies, because retention is also an important thing. You don't want to rush into the industry and then rush out. So I definitely like that. And the comparison thing, I think, is so important, especially linked into imposter syndrome, which is a whole another conversation. So thank you so much for that. I'm now going to ask the final question for you, Amelia, and then I'll ask another question for Joshua. So the final question I'll ask is, how do you stay up to date with the ever-evolving security landscape?
Okay, so I think quite controversially, I don't, and that's going to sound, you're going to think, goodness, like, why does she work in cyber? Why is she here? I think I have very much come to terms with the fact that there is a lot to learn and I can't learn everything, and that is completely okay. So rather than making an overly conscious effort to learn X amount of topics in a quarter, or to spend X amount of time per day, I just take that information on an ad hoc basis. So, cyber's in the news all the time. I think being up to date with current news is very important for cyber, because you'll hear about cyber a lot more in mainstream news now. I think for me, at least, I really try and keep my work life separate to my home life, in the sense that I'm interested in cyber because I do it for a job. I'm not someone that's necessarily interested in it outside of that. I have interests outside of work that are completely separate to cyber. So to keep up with it, I really try and keep it confined to things that are important for me to know. So for what I do, because I work a lot around operational technology, industrial control systems, around critical infrastructure technology, I really focus on, okay, so what are the new policies and frameworks coming out for that? And at the moment, the government have just launched GovAssure, which is very, very applicable to my industry. And, you know, what new controls are coming out for the sorts of technology that I work in? What does good look like for my section of the industry? And I think by doing that, it means I still really like cyber and I'm still really interested in it, but I'm not inundated and I'm not overwhelmed. So I would definitely say to stay up to date, it doesn't mean you have to spend your entire life reading about it. I certainly don't, or I try not to spend my weekends reading about it too much. You can often fall into that trap, but I definitely say knowing that you are never going to learn everything, but learning what's important to you is probably the most manageable way of doing that. I think, Joshua, you may have a better answer for this. It's definitely something that I've grappled with for quite a while. But yeah, I just think look at what you're interested in and what you enjoy and what's relevant. Don't worry about things. You know, I'm not someone that is really that interested in, you know, penetration testing or instant response, because it doesn't really apply to me. I know what I need to know, and that's okay.
Thank you so much, Amelia, and thanks for your honesty as well. Gladly appreciate, because I think sometimes a topic that keeps coming on in cybersecurity is definitely that work-life balance. And how do you have that? And I know right now mental health is also another big conversation within cybersecurity. So thank you for that. And now the final question to Josh, but if you want to answer the previous question, feel free to as well. I just wanted to know, like, you know, how was your experience with the certification exam? Because I know the participants are coming up to doing their exam in June. So what tips can you share from your experience?
Okay, I'll answer that question first. I think with the exam, the first thing I'll say is do as many is Professor Messer. I don't know if I'm allowed to. I'm not marketing a vendor or anything, but he's going to be really helpful. I'll check if I still have it, and I can share with you. He has a book where he broke down questions and how they answered and how CompTIA structures their questions. I think it's very important to understand how the questions are asked, because knowing the thing about cybersecurity is this: it's one thing to know the course content, it's another thing to know how to answer the question. So those are two different things. So you need to, after doing the bootcamp, you need to spend time answering questions. I think there's this site on the internet called Exam Topics as well. They have, I think they have exam dumps as well. You can go there, it's free, or maybe you have to pay something. But just take your time. What I try to do after I go through the whole like syllabus, I try to do like 50 a day. But I don't even care about getting right or wrong. I just want to understand why this is the answer and why this is not the answer. That's the starting point for me. So by doing that, you already give yourself a head start, because by doing that, more often than not, some of these questions are repeated. So you may be lucky, you may get the same question, you may not be lucky, they may change it that day. But the key thing is knowing the mind of the examiner, knowing what they are testing you for, knowing the learning objectives, and that will really help. And to add to what Amelia said, I mean, I really, really, really rate and respect your honesty. I think that's something the world needs more of, you know, especially in the professional environment where everyone is lying and everyone is trying to be what they are not. But it's very, very important to know yourself. And yeah, I mean, Amelia on one hand has the way she views the world and the way she operates, and that works for her, and it's very important. But you know, and there's no right or wrong. This is just me. I'm different, you know, different backgrounds and everything. But for me, you know, to answer the question that was how to, you know, stay up to date, it's just basically social media, being up to date with the news, like on LinkedIn, following just pages that have cyber. You'll see a lot of stuff. Like for example, when I learned about vulnerability management, I never knew that there were like solutions, apps, and everything that, you know, can do it for you. Like risk management, for example, can be automated right now. You don't need to sit down and do a risk analysis. There's software, the applications that do this for you. And I learned it just by basically just going on LinkedIn every night and trying to network, trying to, look for jobs and everything. But I just started seeing different people marketing their stuff. Some will reach out to you, they send you messages, and through those little ways you kind of know. But it's very, very important to stay switched on. For me, who I like to learn, I'm a little bit of a nerd. I am, but I would just say a little bit because I don't want to admit to that. I like to read, I like to learn a lot, so I always have a certification plan. And if you like certifications, that's fine. So this year I'm trying to do CCSP. And after that, I want to do the cloud auditing. I mean, my plan was to do CCSP in March, but this is April. I haven't done it. I haven't even finished going through the syllabus because I've been so busy with actual work. Like mental health and cybersecurity is a real deal. Like you work. It pays well, but you work. So I've not even had the time to start doing the questions I spoke about. But when I had the time, when I was in this engaged, I could do this. So like now after this, it's a weekend. I'm not going to want to read. I've spoken about cybersecurity for almost an hour, so I have to have a life. So with time, you would try to get that work-life balance, but it's always just good to have a plan. Just aim for the stars, just aim high, so even if I don't do the CCSP this year or next year, I have the knowledge. If I go for an interview and someone's talking to me about, oh yeah, okay, this is how to do it. This is what this is, this is what that is. And, so that's just it. So it really, really depends on who you are and what you want for yourself and what you want for your career. And also your situation. I don't have kids. I'm not married. I have time to do most of this stuff, but, hey, things can change pretty quickly, so the last thing I will say is make the best use of your time. Try to be as productive as possible when you have the time, because time is going to come. The higher you go in the field, the higher you go in the field, you see many of the my seniors as well, they don't even, the CISO of where I work only has one certification, but he knows a lot, way more than I do. I can't even contemplate what he knows. I don't even think I even know as much as he does, but he only has one, and I have like 5 right now. So it's not about certifications. It's just about finding a way to know how to do the job at the end of the day. You have a job, it's a role at the end of the day. Can you do the role? That's where it all comes down to. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joshua. And I think what I liked, that you said around the Professor Messer, like we definitely do have shared his videos, but please send us a book. I think we have also shared the study notes with the participants as well, but if you can please share the book, that would be super, super helpful. So we're now going into the fun part, and that is Q&A. So now is the chance for participants, so Mo, Margaret, Simi, Omotola, this is your chance to ask Amelia or Joshua questions about their career journey, or just on anything that we've discussed today. So feel free to either raise your hands or put your question in the chat and we'll answer. Hi, Omotola, go ahead.
Hi, Amelia, and everyone. Hi, thank you for your time. I really appreciate this. But I have a question for Amelia. If she could confirm or discuss how she's been able to deal with imposter syndrome, if she ever experienced it, and how she was able to deal with that.
Yeah, so very, very important question. And about 5 minutes before this call, I said to my partner, I feel like I've got such imposter syndrome about talking about a cyber career to people and sort of being a role model in cyber. And so I've definitely, I still face it now, and I think I have always had it in my career. And for a very long time, I didn't know I know I felt that way, but I didn't know what it was called. And so I think a good starting point is recognizing that feeling, naming that feeling, calling it imposter syndrome. That's okay. There's no shame in that. I think it was worse for me that I didn't know how I was feeling. I just knew that I didn't feel good. I think recognizing it and then really, really thinking back to what do I bring to the field? What have I done thus far? And it's, little things like you don't have to have a whole career in cyber to be knowledgeable about cyber. And I think for me, whenever I feel a bit like I've got imposter syndrome, and I always get that because I always go, oh, I'm quite young still, and I've not necessarily achieved as much yet, but that doesn't mean I've not done well. I can still do well, and I can still be someone that people come to for advice, even if I haven't had a 20-year career, because I know what I bring to the table and I know what I'm good at and I know where I excel. And I think a big thing for me when I feel like I've got imposter syndrome, I redo my CV, and that seems a bit silly because I'm not looking for a new job. I really like my job, but taking an hour to sit down and talk about and write down why I'm good at what I do massively helps me. It makes me reflect on where I've been, and it also makes me reflect on where I'm going, because it makes me think, oh well, I'd like this kind of role in the future, so I'm going to build my CV out to be appropriate for that. So I think it is really hard. I think the sort of two things to summarize what I've said is recognize the feeling and be okay with that. And secondly, it is recognizing your achievements. For me, that's sort of looking through my CV, because I like things to be written down and in front of me. But for other people, that might be something else. But yeah, you're going to feel that way. You may not, but you're likely to. I definitely, everyone I know in cyber has had imposter syndrome. It's just normalizing it for yourself. That goes a really long way.
Thank you so much for that, Amelia. Oh, sorry, Marcelo, did you have something to say to that?
So, because I actually do experience that, like I'm not good enough, I haven't learned enough, I find myself looking for more information than I can deal with. And then I noticed it started taking a toll on my mental health. I had to take a break for like 2 weeks. I'm like, no, I'm not doing anything cyber this 2 weeks, So listening to her say how she's been able to handle it, it's something I'll take back and try to put it before me and, talk to myself, and I'm good enough, And maybe because of all the rejections I've been getting for just trying to break in, it's overwhelming. So yeah, thank you for that.
And I'm glad that it's been helpful, Motala, and you are more than enough. Just to add that there. I'm now going to move on to Simi, who had her hands next.
Hiya. This is a question for, I guess, both of you. I'm trying to see like turn my camera on. So how do you navigate, I guess, progressing in your career or knowing the next steps to take as to maybe you want to switch, I guess, into different areas, cybersecurity? How do you navigate progressing through your career and making sure that you're still not being content with the current role, but wanting to try something new or moving on? Like, how do you guys navigate that?
Joshua, do you want to answer that first, and then Amelia?
Sure. Is my video on? Can't see myself. All right, there we go. I think to answer the question, self-awareness is key. You need to know cybersecurity. For me, it's a job, but when I think about your question, I think about where I am in my life. If I want a new challenge, if you want more money, you just have what drives you really. If you like, for example, Amelia, she's happy at her job. She's not trying to do too much right now, but things can change pretty quickly, But at the end of the day, my advice for everyone as well is also to never drop the ball or to always be proactive. So I always have this proactive mindset of always, let me just try to be one step ahead, because that's why, I moved to cyber, because it was during the pandemic as well. I didn't know where the world was going. My mental health at that period was also really messed up, so I was just like, I need to do something, I need to change something. And that's how I started. And, I never would have thought, when I was lying on my couch confused whether I was going to see my friends again, that one day I'll be speaking to people about cybersecurity. I never would have thought, this wasn't the plan. But it starts from being self-aware. And I know Amelia and I have touched on this a lot, but it's really, really important to know what you want and where you are going. Then from there, you now decide, okay, I need to upskill. If for example, you're okay where you are. So for example, I know some people who all they've got is ISO certifications, and they're working really well. I know someone who makes a lot of money, just one certification, way more than I do. And it's okay, but when he wants something new, he can decide to change. But my advice for everyone is just be proactive, just know what can happen, prepare so that maybe your job can, you can get cuts, and just be ready, Amelia, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I massively agree with that. I think to add to that, I would definitely say know what you enjoy, which I think is what Joshua is definitely saying, but also know that it is totally fine if you don't know what the end goal is for what you want to do in cyber. And I think I've always been asked that, oh, would you like to be a CISO one day, or would you like to be a head of department for something specific? And even still, I don't know what that end goal for me looks like yet, because it may not exist yet. That's the thing with cyber. There are so many roles that are new all the time because there's so much emerging technology. So I think not putting that pressure on yourself when it comes to progression to know what you want to do straight away is totally fine. Do something you enjoy is obviously the key part. I think second to that, I'm sort of trying to think the best way to word things, I suppose, is set expectations with yourself and with the company you work for. So I was someone that advanced very quickly in my career, and that was because I did not stop for 2.5, 3 years. And I really didn't like that after a while. For me, I got to a place where I was very happy, and even in my career now, I have an upcoming promotion. I'm very, very happy, but I didn't enjoy my role, and I didn't necessarily enjoy my personal life because I was so focused on work. Work became my entire life, and I didn't really have that balance. And I think that was because I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. I was always looking for the next thing to do. So I wasn't enjoying the role that I was currently in. And obviously your work and your personal life are so intertwined, as much as we'd like to keep them separate, that you really have to find that fine balance between just enjoying yourself in work. I know with work, we always look for the next promotion or the next pay rise and things. And I think for me, I'm at a point where I'm quite happy with where I am, and I'm very proud of myself. But also I have an expectation that, at the start of this year, I went to my company and I said, I would like to be promoted in the next 6 months, because that is the timeline I had set. That's my expectation. And that's the expectation that you'd communicated to me when I joined here. And setting that expectation with my manager has meant that I have been able to work with her and my head of department to work together to get to there. So having expectations is good. I think additionally with the progress thing, a big thing that we forget, and it was only that recently I had a conversation with my head of department about this, was about also have expectations in your personal life. I would like to have a family in the next 5 to 10 years, and my partner and I would really like to buy a house in the next 5 years. That seems like it's not related to work, but then how am I going to afford all of that without work? So I really communicate to my company what my own goals are as well, because if I need to have a certain salary, they're going to be the ones to help me get there. But I have to tell them that. And, I'm not saying you have to go and divulge all this information to them, but I'm saying you have to be very, very clear with them. Well, in order to achieve what I'd like to do, this is how I need your support. And by having that transparency and that open conversation, you all have good expectations on how you're going to progress, and you can work together and get support on that. So I think not knowing what you want to do, totally fine. Doing what you enjoy is the optimum, but also having a rough idea of what you want, not just for your career, but for you as a person, is also very important.
Thank you. Thanks very much. That's really great. Thank you.
Thank you all for that answers. We're now going to move on to Margaret. You have your hand up?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you so much, Amelia. Thank you, Joe and Joshua. Mine is a bit of a funny one. I just want to peep into your life, as in your day-to-day. What can you give us, like a broad overview of what you do on a daily basis at work? Just a broad overview, both of you, please.
Amelia, do you want to go first?
Yep. So with consultancy, it very much varies depending on the client you're on. So I can give you a good idea of what I do now in the client I'm on. So I work for a major UK airport, and this airport is mandated by the Civil Aviation Authority to be compliant with the cyber assessment framework for aviation, which is the CAF for aviation. You have CAFs in the energy sector, we now have one in government. So my day-to-day at the moment is getting them ready for the audit, which we're currently in. So what that might look like massively varies. Some days it's writing documentation, so very much varies on, I suppose, what you do, what your specialty is. But for me, that's writing operational documentation, it's writing access control procedure documentation, business continuity plans for that system that I'm working on. That's a part of my role. Other parts of my role is working with the business themselves to assure the controls they have in place. And that may be through gap analysis work, that may be through assessment, that may just be from talking to people. A huge part of what I do is engaging with the client. So that's obviously a key part of it. And then this week, most of my week, I've been sat in front of an auditor answering questions about the systems that they're auditing that I've done all of that preparation for. So it very much does vary. I specifically work with one framework because of the sector that I work in at the moment, but it's such a varied role. In my last role, I provided all of the security assurance and risk management for a big defense system. So your day-to-day in security, and this is not me pushing, come and work in consultancy, but if you're someone, I suppose, that really, really likes variation and doesn't want to do the same thing sort of every 6 months to a year, I definitely recommend consultancy because it's quite broad. Over to you, Joshua.
Thanks, Amelia. Very good question, actually. Made me think. But it's my experience is quite similar to my camera's off. My experience is quite similar to Amelia. I work as a business continuity manager. I also a cybersecurity auditor. So this week, for example, I do a lot of audits. So some days we have a calendar for everything. So that helps. So at the start of the year, we plan a lot of things. So we know when we're doing our third-party audit. So for example, our CCTV provider, we have to review the logs, we have to review if everything is in line with the service level agreements that we signed with them. And that's where my legal skills come in, because I can review agreements, and that comes as second nature to me. But let me touch on business continuity management. So with the way it works, there's something called a control self-assessment. So if you work in a bank, you have the legal team, you have the risk management team, you have the IT departments, you have different internal audits, internal control, different units, and they're all going to have their own different business continuity plans. They're always going to have their own different, it's different for everybody. So you want to test what they have. So they do it themselves. You hand it over to them. Okay, what do you do? I mean, we work with them, for example. So if I'm working with the legal team, I'm going to ask them questions like, okay, what are your critical assets? You want to know what they are, and you want to test them. So as often as possible, you want to test that if there's a disruption to operations today. So in Nigeria, we had elections. So prior to the elections, we did a lot of testing, making sure that if things didn't go according to plan and we had to work remotely, everyone could still be operational, everyone could still work functionally. So you work with different teams. This is what Amelia and I were talking about, like empathy, understanding where people are, or how people operate, like what's important to them. So day to day, you have a period of 3 to 4 days where you're working with this team, testing their business continuity plan. Some days when they do, you read it, you have them help them redraft it, work with the business continuity manager for that unit, that team. You have meetings, and then if you have a certification, there's what you call a recertification exercise. So right now we're preparing. I had a kickoff meeting I think I was on Wednesday for the ISO 27001 certification. So, I mean, I work in the GRC space. So yes, I'm a business continuity management manager, but it's really broad. There are a lot of things that, because of my skill set, because they know what I can do, they can like, okay, SA, can you handle this? You know, but because I can as well say that I'm an ISMS auditor, but I like business continuity management because it's my niche and I'm really good at it because I like the drafting, I like the testing processes and whatnot. So you're most likely going to have a calendar, you know, if you work in GRC or if you work as an auditor, there's an audit calendar, there's an audit plan, you know, it's not just, it can be random, but it's not very random. There's usually a structure to what you're working with. So you work with a framework as well. So even if you are confused per se and you don't know what to do, there's so many resources on the internet. I remember when the first time I had to audit on ISO 27001 framework. I'm not certified in that, but I just did my research, went on YouTube, spoke with my senior managers, and I got a checklist. And I just took things from that checklist that apply. So for example, the access control section is there. I just looked at the questions. Is this in place? Is that in place? And through that, you just ask the right questions, you get your responses, and you also need to do, there's a lot of documentation in what I do. So I write a lot of reports. We do a cybersecurity quarterly. Every quarter, and in the bank, we have quarterly reports that we need to prepare. So there's a board meeting next week. I'm going to start working on, you know, the business continuity management report that is going to be presented to the board of directors. And that is in line with the calendar. So the most important thing is try as much as possible to get some structure to your work. Luckily for me, I work in a bank. Some people say there's no structure where they work. Some people are just starting new security teams. I remember I interviewed for a company last time. They gave me the offer, but there was no structure. And I really wasn't comfortable with that because I was going to have to build everything from the scratch. And that was not what I wanted to do, because when I find myself in a position where I don't really know, you know, what to do, it's kind of like someone asks about imposter syndrome. It can be really crippling when you're about to start something, you have no core experience in, and, you know, some days I'll just sit down in front of my computer and I'm just go on my Instagram or my Snapchat and just be like, man, I don't want to do this. But after a while, you get the motivation to do that. So for me, my day-to-day depends on the calendar and what needs to be done. And that just influences, you know, how I operate. Don't know if that answers your question.
Fine. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amelia. Thank you.
Sorry, just to add, I've shared the Professor Messer CompTIA practice exams, but I just realized that I took the 501 and there's a 601. What I'll try to do is I have a WhatsApp group that has a lot of has a lot of important resources. If you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I can also like help you get in this group. It's called Info Security Folks. They have a lot of free resources for every single exam you can think of. CISSP, CC, CISA, everything. So it's a WhatsApp group chat, and they have this Google Drive where you basically have access to a whole lot of cybersecurity material. So if you're interested in that, we can talk on LinkedIn and I can find a way to help. But this is the 501. I don't know how different it is from the 601, but I think Stephanie can help out with that. But thank you.
No, thank you so much, Joshua, for that, and thank you, Amelia. And also thanks for sharing it in the chat. And definitely, guys, check the agenda for this event or your calendar. I put both of the speakers' names. I'm also going to put this on YouTube in case you want to get their names again to connect with them on LinkedIn. But before we move on to the next stage, I just want us just to give a round of applause to Amelia and Joshua for dedicating their time this evening to speak to us about their experience and their background. We're truly, truly honored. You know, I've been inspired, and I'm sure that all the participants have been inspired as well. And now we're going to go to the fun part, which is the graduation. So as you guys know, I did say that there is going to be certificates. I see Simi's celebration. So I'm going to start with Margaret. If we could all give a round of applause to Margaret. Thank you so much, Margaret. I'm going to share the certificates with everyone after this event. The next person is Mosope Folua. Can give a round of applause. And I'm seeing there's a bit of issues with the certificates here, but it will be fixed when I send it to you guys. Third person is Omotala Olusoga. Congratulations. And Simi Lulua, okay. And then last but not least, Talia Barnaby as well. So congratulations everyone for completing the program. And I just wanted to say a huge thanks to all of you guys. Like I said, it's not been easy. The bootcamp has been 3-4 hours every Saturday for the past 12 weeks, but everyone has really put their best foot forward. And I just want to say congratulations to all of you. I want to say again, thank you again to the speakers. We want to say thank you to Sage, the mentors and our co-organizers for this bootcamp. Also want to say thank you to KPMG for their speakers and for also co-organizing this bootcamp. And also Antonio is not here, but also thank you to Antonio as well. So thank you so much everyone for being part of this. I will be in touch with all the participants for you guys to give me, I know I've said it before, but for you guys to give me the dates for your exams. And then after that, we would follow up to kind of see how we can help you guys further. So thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a great evening. I'm going to stop the recording now.